Welcome to Private Banking Strategies Podcast with Vance Lowe and Seth Hicks, your secret weapon to protect your assets and never have to start over financially again. Vance and Seth help high net worth individuals, families, business owners, and investors structure an asset-protected, tax-free fortress for their families. Learn how to keep what you earn and use the velocity of money to create your own private banking system. Join us on this journey as we explore the secret strategies of the rich and political elite and help you take total control of your financial security. Now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to Private Banking Strategies Podcast with Vance Lowe and Seth Hicks. Vance, how are you today?
I'm doing great today, Seth. How are you doing?
Doing real well. Glad to bring another topic to folks that we often get, broad level or high end questions of why do people do private banking strategies? Why people implement these strategies in their lives? And so I'd like to kind of talk to our audience about 30,000 foot overview, something we like to call the 7 pillars of private banking strategies, things that you can use as cornerstones and take to the bank, pun intended, your own bank.
Seth, before we actually get into the pillars, let's kind of dissect why we're getting that question all the time, why people use it. One of the main reasons I'm finding out is they're totally dissatisfied with their money flow. They work hard, but most people feel like they're in a rat race. What is your take on that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, people all the time tell me, hey, they can't keep up with the cost of inflation. They've got expenditures and outflow of cash that they earn. And at the end of the month or the end of the period, they don't seem to have anything to show for it. And their quality of life is decreasing. And that's a primary motivating factor.
Yeah, with government encroaching more on our private lives, our individual liberties, and, Uncle Sam trying to get every penny they possibly can. The only thing we have left is what's called faith and hope.
Right.
And people are starting to hear this, and we're really getting a response here, because if people will take the time and be willing to learn something new, I think they can solve their issues with this strategy. So I think that's some of the main reasons they're there. They know if they spend $1 that they've got to go back to work and replace that dollar. What they're starting to realize is that they got to make everybody else money along the way just to replace that dollar. So,
right.
Yeah, it's a rat race. So.
And I think that's that's why we have the very first pillar of private banking strategies is asset protection, because when you can protect your assets and keep what you make, you're able to grow what you make. And in the private banking strategies system, you're in a system that is a tax-free economy, compounding and growing.
What about, the asset protection side with their accounts at bank? How safe are they?
Well, in 2012, in the Obama administration, they enacted what's known as the Dodd Frank Act. And the Dodd Frank Act was a earthquake in the financial banking industry. And most people didn't even know that it happened. And it was a planned takeover, effectively, of depositors' money. So when you go to the bank and you deposit money into the bank, the bank actually controls and has that money for their own use. And so long as not everybody goes back to the bank at the same time to withdraw their money, the system works okay. But if there's a banking crisis like we saw recently with Silicon Valley Bank, or there's been numerous other banks that have failed, IndyMac Bank over history, and people rush to get their deposits out and they're not there. There are bank lockouts and people lose money. Cyprus was a country that had bail on depositors' money, which is what the Dodd Frank Act effectively enables. It enables banks to bail in on depositors' money if they're insolvent, and the depositors are left with pennies on the dollar or with bank stock. And so neither one of those are acceptable in my estimation for most people. They just don't realize it. But when they actually swallow that red pill and understand that banks actually do have the right to bail in on their deposits and that their deposits are not theirs in the event of a banking crisis and insolvency, they come to terms with there's got to be a better way. And there is a better way. It's a way that's been around for hundreds of years. And I'll hand the mic to you for a minute to describe what that banking methodology has been for hundreds of years before branch banking hit our society.
Yeah, so there seems to be a huge lack of education and information in our country. But our country in the past has been known for free education and the ability to learn almost anything. I call it the War of 1900. When the Federal Reserve was born, they literally took over our country. And because we had a young, budding company that just went from nothing to a powerhouse overnight. And there was a power here and a way that the American people could excel far beyond any other nation in our history. To get to the root of that was all the way down to the individual family. Each family had enough education so that they could survive. Just think of, the pilgrims, the settlers. They could throw everything they owned in a covered wagon and go west and survive because they had the learning, the knowledge, and the training to be able to do that. Part of that was all about economy. Another word for economy would be how you set up your own town. These people would have to go out. Sometimes they would be 3 or 4 families, sometimes it'd be a big wagon train or whatever, and they would start their own settlement, their own civilization, and they could put that together and create it and become extremely profitable, very powerful, because they understood the economics of how money worked, or literally how to run an economy. And that is what was taken out of our education. There are those 3 things that were taken out, which was the Federal Reserve caused to happen. Second was, we call it a Ponzi scheme, the Social Security, to get people reliant on government. And then the third was control of our education system to start changing the way we think and the way we go forward. So that's probably beat that to death, but that's the big cause of our problems today, of where people are heading. The Federal Reserve were never Americans. They're socialists and communists, and they wanted this country. And by all shapes and means, they probably have it, and we don't know it unless we fight for our own freedoms. So that's why, Seth, I think you and I have dedicated ourselves to try to educate people to these 7 pillars, because this is the foundation of bringing people back into their own personal freedom state. So
Right.
Asset protection is at the top of the list. We've got to be assured that what we have and we hold is ours. Government
Right.
today says no, nothing you own is yours. That's the way they're treating us, okay? But we do have deeds, we do have autonomy, we do have laws protecting us as long as we, uphold those laws. So once we settle on the asset protection, what's the next event that we have to
Well,
look
well, the audience might be going, well, why do you have asset protection with private banking strategies? What is it, and why is it asset protected compared to traditional branch banking? And so, just from a high level, your cash assets kept in a bank are subject to being taken if there's a bank insolvency. Uh, Next, there is a federal FDIC insurance up to $250,000 per account. And people go, well, that's my insurance policy. But when you actually do a deep dive on the FDIC and its solvency, you'll find that it's on the very best calculation balance sheet, it might be worth 100 billion. And there are 20 trillion in cash deposits, in American deposits in banks. So 100 billion can't cover 20 trillion. And so if there's a catastrophic bank events and failures, the FDIC will not be able to make good on those promises to insure deposits, $250,000 or any deposit. And that's not just my opinion. There are other economists. There's a Harvard economist that's published paper on that. There's other peer review tested articles that are out there for people's analysis that demonstrate the FDIC is insolvent and that centralized banks can bail in on your money. So then the next question is, well, where do I put it? And that goes back to the question that we were asking of when the Federal Reserve was created, which happened to be the same time the IRS was created, and how does the Federal Reserve, operate? If you want to do a deeper dive, there's a great book called The Creature from Jekyll Island that we recommend that clients read that helps explain the Federal Reserve and also, some of the sinister communistic, socialistic ideals that spawned the Federal Reserve and the IRS. Now, the alternative is using something that's been around for hundreds of years prior to this, which is banking through life insurance contracts. And life insurance contracts are completely distinctive from branch banking.
Did that story feel like it was about you? Do you feel like you are generating a lot of revenue, but are not moving forward as fast as you would like? Do you feel you should be making more progress toward your financial goals? Do you feel stuck? Let us help you get unstuck. Are you ready to take action and get your own private bank? Please call Private Banking Strategies at 817-200-4777 or visit us at www.privatebankingstrategies.com.
What's the difference between a life insurance contract that you use to bank and, Wells Fargo on the corner of Main and First?
Well, the life insurance company was the financial heart and blood of America. We didn't have banks, but we did have life insurance. Life insurance came over, I think, on the Mayflower. I'm not sure when it came, but it came from England first and was set up to handle that. It's called the banking equation because there's much more than just money in itself back then. It was, deeds, precious metals, things like that. And an agent would take care of that for a fee. And then pretty soon, new companies started to form as the need arose, and the policy holders were the owners. And they set up their own system, their own banking, so that they could handle that. And they stored their money in these accounts. These accounts had ironclad guarantees on a death benefit, on earnings, and the availability to access your money and put it back. So they would literally self-finance everything in these contracts because they understood the economy of money. Today we don't. We think we should spend money, and our job is to change you from spending money to using money. They then used their money wisely, and they got it back with interest, plus the interest that it was making inside the contract. They came out very, very well. These were wonderful opportunities and contracts. It was very healthy. Everybody understood the flow of money, and the safe haven was the insurance companies. Bring that forward today, they carry a dispensation because these insurance companies were here up and running full-blown before the IRS. And so they carry dispensations. If they have, according to my understanding, if they have accounts, if they hold their accounts at banks, which I'm sure they do, they have a dispensation that does not affect them in any way. Dodd Frank Act laws, things like that. Can that change in the future? Maybe government can make that happen. They did come in and make one big change back in the late 70s, but that's been it. I think even government is reluctant to do that because they know the financial safe haven and where all the experts live are in life insurance companies. And that's where banks and government store their safe money, is in life insurance companies. So they don't want to disturb that. And that was the secret of America's success, was we understood how to do that, how powerful the family was. We didn't pay taxes back then. We made money. Government actually made a profit. Can you imagine that? Instead of being a deficit of what, $3 or $4 trillion now, they actually had a profit back
Right.
when the IRS was first put in.
And one of the reasons that the life insurance companies, their solvency is diametrically different than centralized banks is because of something called fractionalized banking and derivative lending. And the centralized banks engage in fractionalized lending. That means when you bring in $100,000 and deposit it in the bank, they take 10% at most and keep that in reserve. And they take the other $90,000 that you just handed them and they loan it out to other people at interest. And they make money off the money that you just brought in, and they don't pay you anything. You're not a partner in that. You don't get any interest payments. You don't get any dividends from that bank. In fact, you get fees and you get hassled when you want to get your money out. But that's called fractionalized banking and derivative lending. Insurance companies cannot engage in that. They're regulated state by state, not by the federal government, and they all require a one-to-one cash reserve. So they have to have complete liquidity for death benefits, complete liquidity for your money when you come to get your money. Say, hey, I want my money wired here. It's there. And so, we don't have any trouble getting money out of banks. They don't ask questions from your life insurance company. Rather, they don't ask questions when you pull your money out. They don't ask questions for purpose of funds or any type of financial prying like your typical banks do nowadays.
Yeah, you only have to answer two questions. They're going to ask you, how much do you want? Where do you want it sent?
Right.
Also, one more thing on that is that life insurance companies do it, handle money the correct way. Everything with the life insurance companies called annualized. So a lot of times if we have term policies, we've paid monthly premiums. But however, if you pay an annual premium, you avoid the modal fees, which are 6 to 8%. And in addition, if these are these participating mutual whole life insurance contracts, when you pay the annualized premium, they pay you the earnings and the cash value into your account up front within the first 2 weeks. Everything is up front. When you borrow, they're going to charge you interest up front and then pay you back for the unearned interest. Well, the banks have corrupted that. They've gone into the rears. They don't want to give you any credit for anything until the end of the year. When you pay interest, you may prepay interest, but they do not pay back the unearned interest, especially on mortgages. So they really do it a corrupt way. That 10-to-1 ratio, if it's $100,000, they keep $10,000 and they get to lend out $800,000 because it's a multiple of 10, a factor of 10. And that other money comes from thin air, and that's where the problem comes from.
And that's critically important thing to understand of why banks will fail ultimately. Because with the printing of money and the increase of its inflationary policy, the printing of money will never solve economic problems. And that's the difference between Keynesian and Austrian economics. And so it's printing your way out of debt and out of crisis is a recipe for failure. It always has been, and it always will be. And right now, our national debt is about $35 trillion and rapidly increasing by the second. And the monetary policy is to just print your way out of it, and that won't work.
Oh, Seth, I think last year we crossed a threshold. Our gross national production cannot pay the interest on that debt now. And now you really have a spiraling effect. So unless you can be independent and set up your own system and not participate, you're going to have a problem. Banks are going to fail. A lot of things are going to happen. Venezuela is a good one, to look and see. We're following that path almost to the T. So Argentina, those are all countries that you could bring a whole wheelbarrow full of money to the bank and it wouldn't buy a loaf of bread.
So one of the cornerstones, like we said, asset protection, and we kind of dived into that and discussed how the difference between centralized banks like Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Chase, JP Morgan Chase, all of these big box banks, or even other banks that are regulated by central banking policies, operate on derivative lending, whereas your life insurance companies, they don't. And so your money is safe there and fully accessible and without questions. So once it's in that system, Vance, the private banking strategy system within a whole life insurance contract that we structure in a very particular way, are there any taxes on the money in your life insurance contract?
This seems to be an unknown factor that I've always grown up with, and most people don't know the answer to this question. But the answer is no, it is not taxable. The gains inside the contract are we're going to call it tax advantaged. The IRS will try to go after anything they think they can get away with. But the law says that money inside the contract, it's not reportable. The insurance companies do not file any form with the IRS or do anything of that nature if we're following, certain modern day guidelines. That money is literally just private. Nobody knows where it's at except the life insurance company and you. So the gains on it, there's a guaranteed rate of return. That is not taxable. You can pull that out totally tax-free. You can figure out a way to make it taxable after you've pulled out your basis, we'll call it. In addition to that, you get profits of the life insurance company. And what that profit is, it is a return of premium, and that is not taxable. And again, Uncle Sam or the IRS will say, well, there's got to be a point where we can start robbing you again. And yes, there is, but then these contracts have another key feature that stop that dead in the water. You can borrow the gains out. Loans are not taxable. And you figure out a formula there. I've got lots of people in full retirement living off of their policies, living off the income their policies provide, and absolutely no taxes whatsoever. So yes, you gain privacy and tax freedom. We call this, the money going into this contract is after tax. So we're paying tax on the money on the premiums that are going in. But the volume of growth is the harvest. So the seed is what we paid tax on. The harvest coming out, all this growth, totally can be non-taxed.
Right. And it's actually the Internal Revenue Code 7702, which specifies that these contracts are not taxable. That's why the ultra wealthy politicians and politically elite use these for that tax benefit. Like I said, Internal Revenue Code 7702 says that the money once inside the policy is not taxable. So the insurance companies don't raise their hands and file 1099s or W-2s or any type of tax form. And it's a financially private transaction, which is totally different than something like a 401k or a 403b or any other government-sponsored retirement program, where you're putting money in after it's taxed, and then they say, well, it's going to be tax deferred growth. But when you take the money out, you're taxed on it, and you're taxed on a higher sum, and you're taxed on the basis of whatever income bracket you're in, which many times is higher. So you pay more taxes. And you also, if you don't have liquidity with the government-sponsored retirement programs, if you take it out too early, you're taxed and penalized. If you take it out too late, you're penalized. There's a sweet spot in the middle that you have to take it out, and then you're taxed. So compare that with the private banking strategies, and there's no tax when you're taking the money out. There's no tax on the death benefit, and it's a completely tax-free economy that you're able to grow and compound in. That's stark difference that a lot of people need to understand about this. So what we've been talking about with asset protection and tax-free economies within your private banking strategies is a fundamental cornerstone of why people choose to implement these strategies. And there's 7 full pillars, Vance, that we need to talk through, but we've kind of come to an end for this first part. It'll be either a 2 or a 3-part series of why we choose private banking strategies and what it does. So this will be a part 1. And if in the meantime, if you're waiting for the next publication, you want to learn more about it, you can do that, folks, on our website at privatebankingstrategies.com. It's privatebankingstrategies.com. And there you can exchange your email for a red pill book that Vance and I have written titled What the Banks Don't Want You to Know. And therein you're going to discover some concepts and some ideas like we're talking about here that may revolutionize your whole thinking. If that resonates with you, continue to listen to the podcast, continue to digest some of the information that you'll get by email. And eventually, if those things are resonating with you and making sense, we want you to set up an exploratory call with Vance. And you can do that through links that we provide in emails. And that's really our process for walking people into private banking strategies.
Yeah, I just really enjoyed talking about it. I enjoy any time someone will listen and want to learn a little bit more. So I'm looking forward to discussing these next few pillars.
Awesome. Well, thank you, folks, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Did that story feel like it was about you? Do you feel you should be making more progress toward your financial goals? Do you feel stuck? Let us help you get unstuck. Are you ready to take action and get your own private bank? Please visit us at www.privatebankingstrategies.com.
Thank you for listening to the Private Banking Strategies podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available.